Good evening. Trump's Homeland Security Secretary mulls removing customs agents from airports to punish sanctuary cities. As it happened. What if this move, this idea of pulling customs agents out of major airports in sanctuary cities, isn't just about immigration policy at all, but a calculated pressure tactic designed to economically isolate political opponents from within the United States itself? It sounds extreme, almost implausible at first, but when you line up the timing, the language, and the potential consequences, it begins to look less like a policy debate and more like a strategic lever being positioned in real time. A lever that doesn't just apply pressure quietly, but one that can reshape the economic heartbeat of entire regions. And the deeper you go into this story, the more it starts to feel like something much bigger is unfolding behind the scenes. Let me walk you through this. Because what we're seeing here isn't just another headline, it's a signal. A signal that the rules of internal power dynamics inside the United States may be shifting in ways that are far more strategic than they appear on the surface. And it starts with a very specific moment. In late March 2026, reports began surfacing that the Department of Homeland Security, under pressure from Trump-aligned leadership, was actively considering removing or reallocating Customs and Border Protection officers from major U.S. airports located in sanctuary jurisdictions. Cities like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, San Francisco, economic engines of the country, deeply integrated into global trade, finance, and travel networks, cities that act as gateways not just for people, but for global capital itself. Here's where it gets interesting. Customs agents aren't just security personnel. They are the gatekeepers of international flow, of people, goods, and by extension, capital. According to pre-2025 DHS data, CBP processes over 410 million travelers annually and oversees nearly $3 trillion in imported goods. That's not a small number. That's the backbone of how the United States connects to the global economy. Now imagine selectively disrupting that flow, not nationwide, but in politically targeted zones, in areas where federal and local governments are already in conflict. Think about that for a second. If even 15 to 20% of CBP staffing were pulled from major coastal airports, wait times could spike from under an hour to several hours. International arrivals would bottleneck. Cargo clearance could slow by 10 to 25%. And in a just-in-time global economy, delays aren't just inconvenient. They're expensive. They create friction. And friction in global trade always translates into cost. We're talking about supply chain ripple effects that could hit industries within days. Pharmaceutical imports delayed in California. High-value electronics stuck in New York. Perishable goods losing value on the tarmac in Chicago. Automotive components arriving late, slowing production lines. Retail inventory missing seasonal deadlines. And once those disruptions begin, they don't stay contained. They spread. But it doesn't stop there. Because airports aren't just travel hubs, they're economic arteries. In 2024 alone, JFK Airport contributed over $85 billion to regional economic activity. LAX wasn't far behind. These are massive nodes in the economic network. If operational efficiency drops, even slightly, airlines start rerouting. Logistics companies adjust corridors. Investors notice risk. Insurance premiums for cargo shipments could rise. Freight contracts could be renegotiated. And suddenly, what started as a staffing adjustment begins to look like a systemic shift. And markets react. They always do. Because markets don't wait for confirmation. They move on expectation. If traders believe that key logistics hubs are becoming unreliable, even temporarily, capital begins to reposition. Airline stocks could face pressure. Shipping companies may revise forecasts. Regional bonds tied to infrastructure could see volatility. And this is where the financial layer begins to overlap with the political layer. Now let's connect the dots. The timing of this discussion isn't random. It's unfolding against the backdrop of escalating political tension ahead of the 2026 midterm election cycle. Sanctuary cities, predominantly governed by Democratic leadership, have long been in conflict with federal immigration enforcement priorities. But this move reframes that conflict entirely. It transforms it from a legal or ideological dispute into an economic one. And that changes the battlefield completely. Because now, the leverage isn't about policy compliance, it's about financial pressure. It's about creating consequences that are measurable, visible, and immediate. Not in courtrooms, but in balance sheets. Imagine you're a mayor in one of these cities. Tourism revenue starts dropping, business travel declines, hotel occupancy rates begin to slip, port activity slows, local chambers of commerce begin raising alarms. CEOs start calling city officials, asking what's happening, demanding stability. Suddenly, immigration policy isn't just a moral or political stance, it's tied directly to economic survival. And that's where the strategy reveals itself. This isn't about immediate enforcement. It's about creating a feedback loop of pressure. Federal action triggers economic disruption. Economic disruption triggers local backlash. Local backlash forces political recalibration. It's indirect influence, but highly effective when executed precisely. But it gets worse. Because this doesn't happen in isolation, global actors are watching. Countries like China, Germany, Japan, South Korea, major trade partners with heavy reliance on U.S. entry points, are extremely sensitive to logistics disruptions. If U.S. airports become unpredictable, even selectively, multinational corporations start hedging. They don't wait, they adapt. They reroute shipments. They diversify entry points. Some shift operations to ports in Canada or Mexico before entering the U.S. Others increase reliance on domestic production or alternative markets. And once that shift begins, it's hard to reverse. Supply chains are sticky. They don't snap back easily.
Let's talk numbers.
If just 5% of international cargo reroutes away from a major U.S. airport due to delays, that could represent tens of billions of dollars in diverted trade over a single quarter. Add to that airline losses, reduced passenger throughput, declining tourism revenue, and downstream effects on local businesses, and you're looking at a potential multi-layered economic contraction in targeted regions within 90 to 120 days.
And here's the part that most people miss. Who benefits from that?
This is where the financial dimension becomes critical. Domestic regions outside sanctuary jurisdictions, particularly in states aligned with federal policy, could see increased traffic. Airports in Texas, Florida, Arizona, even parts of the Midwest could absorb redirected flows. That means more jobs, more cargo handling, more hotel bookings, more investment flowing into those areas. Infrastructure expansion follows demand. Funding follows growth. And suddenly, economic gravity begins to shift geographically. It's a redistribution of economic power. And it's happening through policy, not natural market evolution. Think about that. Now zoom out. This isn't just a domestic maneuver. It's a message internationally. It signals that the U.S. federal government is willing to use internal economic levers as tools of political enforcement. And that has implications far beyond immigration policy. It affects trade negotiations, diplomatic trust, and alliance stability. Partners may start questioning reliability. Competitors may see opportunity, and global institutions may begin recalibrating expectations about how stable U.S. logistics networks really are under political pressure. Now let's bring in the timeline again. By early April 2026, internal discussions reportedly intensified. By mid-April, we could see pilot reallocations, small-scale, strategic, possibly framed as operational adjustments rather than political actions. By late spring, early signs of disruption could begin to appear in travel data. By summer, if escalated, this could coincide directly with peak travel season, maximizing visibility and pressure. And right there, that's the strategic timing. Peak economic activity, maximum disruption, maximum leverage, maximum visibility. And just months before key political milestones, when narratives matter the most and perception can influence voter sentiment more than policy detail. Now here's where it becomes even more layered. Because this move intersects with broader global dynamics, at the same time, tensions in critical regions like the Strait of Hormuz continue to fluctuate. Energy markets remain sensitive. Oil prices have already shown volatility, moving between $80 and $95 per barrel in recent weeks. Any additional instability, especially in U.S. logistics, adds another layer of uncertainty to global markets. Investors don't like stacking risks, and when risks stack, capital moves. Money begins flowing into safer assets. Gold sees upward pressure. Treasury yields fluctuate. The dollar reacts depending on capital inflows versus trade disruptions. And suddenly, what started as a domestic immigration enforcement debate begins influencing global financial positioning. That's the scale we're dealing with here. If you're following this breakdown, make sure you're subscribed to ANC News, because these are the kinds of developments that don't just make headlines, they quietly reshape the global balance of power while most people are still focused on the surface narrative. And we're not done yet, because the leverage doesn't stop at economics. It extends into negotiation. Imagine federal officials entering discussions with sanctuary city leaders. The conversation is no longer theoretical, it's backed by real-time data. Declining airport throughput, reduced tax revenues, business complaints, rising unemployment in affected sectors. This changes the tone completely. It's no longer a debate, it's leverage in action. And historically, when economic leverage is applied with precision, it produces faster and more tangible outcomes than prolonged legal battles. Now consider the political angle heading into late 2026. If this strategy successfully forces even partial compliance or policy shifts, it becomes a powerful narrative, a demonstration of control, a message that federal authority can reshape local outcomes not through direct confrontation, but through systemic pressure. That's a compelling story in a political campaign. But there's risk, and it's significant. Because if the economic damage spreads beyond targeted areas, if supply chain disruptions cascade nationally, it could backfire. Inflation could rise again. Consumer prices could increase. Small businesses could struggle. And voters, regardless of political alignment, respond quickly to economic pain. That's the unpredictable variable in this equation. So this is a high-stakes move. High reward, high risk. And those are the kinds of strategies that define turning points. Now, let's project forward 3 to 6 months. If implementation begins in the second quarter of 2026, by the third quarter, we could start seeing measurable indicators: airport congestion data, cargo delay reports, airline route adjustments, corporate earnings reflecting logistics challenges, regional economic reports showing divergence between affected and unaffected areas. By the fourth quarter, those trends could solidify. Businesses may begin making longer-term decisions, relocation discussions, investment shifts, contract renegotiations. And once those decisions are made, they don't reverse quickly. And just like that, a policy idea turns into a structural shift. Now here's the big question. Is this a temporary tactic or the beginning of a new model of internal economic enforcement? Because if it works, if it achieves political objectives without triggering widespread backlash, it sets a precedent. And precedents have a way of expanding beyond their original scope. They get adapted, they get refined, and they get used again in different contexts. Imagine similar strategies applied to other sectors: federal funding allocations, infrastructure prioritization, regulatory enforcement patterns, all becoming tools of strategic pressure rather than neutral governance. That's a very different system. A system where economics becomes the primary language of political influence. And we may be watching its early stages unfold in real time. So when you hear about customs agents being potentially removed from airports, don't think of it as a simple staffing decision. Think of it as a signal of how power is being exercised, a signal of how conflicts are being reframed, a signal of how economic pressure is becoming a central tool in domestic strategy, and a signal of how the next phase of political maneuvering might look, not just in the United States, but globally. If you want to stay ahead of these shifts, stay connected with ANC News, because this story is still developing, still evolving, and every new detail adds another layer to an already complex strategic picture. As we move deeper into 2026, watch the indicators carefully. Airport efficiency metrics, trade flow patterns, market reactions, political responses from city governments, federal follow-through, and most importantly, the timing of each move. Because in strategy, timing is everything. And right now, the timing suggests that this is not random. It is calculated, it is deliberate, and it is only just beginning. The geopolitical chessboard is no longer confined to international borders. It is being played within them. Match is only getting started. And as these moves unfold, one thing becomes increasingly clear. Power is being tested, leverage is being applied, and the balance between federal authority and local autonomy is entering a new phase, one that could redefine how governance and economics intersect for years to come. This is not the end of the story. In many ways, this is the opening move. And ANC News will continue tracking every development, because this geopolitical chess